Hey everyone, Miss Yancey here, doing our acrylic color wheel today. So the first thing we're going to want to do is label your color wheel. I wrote the actual paint names around, so I'm using fire red, chrome orange, etc. Next, I'm going to start with red, and I'm going to do my hue, which means it's coming straight from the cup. Now, you want to do a nice even coat, so you're going to see me filling in the spaces of that first section, okay? Now, acrylic dries very quickly, so you could do a second coat. And you'll see me do that a couple times in this video. So I'm filling in those spaces. I'm trying my best to stay in the lines. Now, what you see me do here is I am going to scoop out my white paint, because up next we are going to create a tint. Okay, so I'm scooping out just the tiniest bit of black for my shades and white for my tint. Now, when you're making your tints, you are going to need a majority of white paint and just a little bit of your color, your hue. And I'm mixing it over here on my palette. And then same thing, I'm going to go in and fill that space in. Now, you're going to see me on my palette mix and grab colors without washing my brush off. Once you scoop the paint out of your little 2-ounce cups, how dirty it gets on your palette is just an artist preference, okay? Artist preference. So now I'm going to start my shade. So I've picked up just the tiniest bit of black, and I've gotten a significant amount of my red. So notice how it's turning into this darker red. It's more like a maroon, kind of going back and forth until I get to the shade that I want. I'm going to fill in the space. It's a smaller space when it's going to be a significant change from the one above it, okay? Because the one above it, we added white. One below, we're adding black. This last section is going to be our tone, okay? So I'm going to finish filling in those spaces, and then I'm going to mix together some gray paint and create a tone, okay? Mixing red with the gray I've created. I'm going to continue this process in my orange paint. I've scooped out a little bit from my cup, and I've put it on my palette. As you work, you're going to want to make sure after you wash your brush off that you are drying it very well on a paper towels that you will also need to have on your table. If it is not dried very well on the paper towels, it waters down the paint and you might have to do more layers of that color. Now, I want you to notice that periodically in this video, I do a color and I move on, and then I come back and do a second layer. That's because I let it dry, and I don't think it is quite pigmented enough or strong enough on the color wheel, so I go back and add a second layer. I encourage you to double check your colors as they dry so that they look full and pigmented and they don't look watered down. For some reason, every time when I used the green paint today to create these exercises, it came out really watered down. So I actually do let this one dry and revisit it. I'm not sure if it is just the chemical makeup of this type of acrylic paint or what is going on. The same thing happened with the violet paint. So I actually go in and do another coat on that hue of a pure color. Now I'm going to have to mix some more of my gray paint here because I did not quite mix enough at the beginning. Now if you do that, I do encourage you to try and mix it, especially if it's dried a little bit. You'll notice kind of on mine that I mix it directly on top of the gray I already used because I don't want it to be too different of a tone than what I was using. Otherwise, my color wheel will not be quite accurate enough. But you'll notice I do go back and add a little bit of that hue on top of my green, and it just makes it more pigmented and a stronger color. I also jumped back to my yellow shade and added another coat. Now I chose to use cobalt blue just because it is my favorite. I prefer it over the ultramarine, but just make sure whichever one you use, because we do have more than one option, make sure that you write down which one you use. That way you have it in your mind and physically in front of you for any future use of the color, so you know what it will look like. I love cobalt. I love how the tint turns out. I think it looks great. I like how it transfers kind of to a navy blue when you create the shade. It's just my preference. But if you use ultramarine, that is fine. Just make sure you write that down on your color wheel paper. Okay, I'm going into our last and final color, so it is violet, and you can already tell the hue that was put down is not very pigmented, so I'm definitely going to need to do another layer on that. As this video winds up, I want to remind you to wash your brushes with soap and water and put them hair up when you are done. You also can wash off your palette. If it's a disposable palette, then you can just throw it away. But if it's one that you are not going to reuse the colors on and you're done with it, then you can wash it off. Just be very mindful. I would wipe it off with a paper towel to throw into the trash can before going to the sink. Remember, when you're done, it needs to be dry, and then you can turn it in with your scales.